This is Tony Victor, and I'm doing a reading from G.I. Gurdjieff's In Search of Being.
Formatory thinking. In the practical study through self-observation, it is important to understand the nature of our so-called thinking function, which is in fact the mechanical part of the thinking center and the center of gravity of our personality. Our thinking, feeling, and moving centers are in themselves animate brains, and they live like corresponding animals incorporated in one body, with each brain acting as a moving factor. These brains are connected with one another, but their intercommunication depends upon the relative strength of their associations. Only if a stimulus is strong enough in one center can a corresponding association be evoked in another, and then only if the stimulus has a particular velocity or intensity that has already become established in us. The center of gravity of the personality is not animate, but simply an apparatus for thinking, which is located in the head. The connections between this formatory apparatus and the centers are open and direct, and all associations reach it. Every local stimulus in the centers, every association provokes associations in the apparatus, but the matter of the apparatus is inanimate. The apparatus is simply a machine, just like a letter keyboard that transmits every impact. The best way to illustrate the formatory apparatus is by analogy. It is a factory office with a secretary. Every incoming paper comes to this person. Every client who comes in addresses him, and he replies to everything. The answers given are qualified by the fact that this person himself is only an employee. He does not know anything, but has instructions, books, files, and dictionaries on the shelves. If he has sources in which to look up some particular information, he does so and replies accordingly. If he hasn't, he does not. This factory also has 4 partners or directors who sit in 4 different rooms, although most of the time they are not there. These directors communicate with the outside world through the secretary. They are connected with his office by telephone. If one of them calls and says something, the secretary has to pass it on. But each of the 4 directors uses a different code that has been agreed upon. When one of them sends a message to be transmitted, the secretary has to decode it before passing it on. He has in the office a quantity of forms and materials that have accumulated over the years. Depending on the director involved, the secretary consults a book, decodes a message, and transmits it. If the directors want to talk to one another, there is no means of direct communication between them. They are connected by telephone, but this telephone works only in good weather and in conditions of calm and quiet, which seldom occur. Since these conditions are rare, the directors send messages through the central exchange, that is, the secretary's office. Since each one of them has its own code, it is the secretary's job to decode and recode these messages. The directors communicate with people outside in the same way. Everything that comes in or goes out must be decoded and recoded, then forwarded to its destination. Incoming correspondence for one of the directors is forwarded to the appropriate code, but the secretary often makes mistakes and uses the wrong code. The director receives the messages and understands nothing. Thus, the decoding and recoding depend on this employee who has no interest in or concern for the business. As soon as the daily grind is over, he goes home. His decoding skill depends on his education, which varies from person to person. One secretary may be a fool or another a good business person. There is an established routine in the office which the secretary follows. If a certain code is needed, he brings out one or another frequently used form that happens to be handy. For every kind of inquiry, there are ready-made labels that are immediately affixed. This is an appropriate picture of the state of affairs in our inner organization. The office is our formatory apparatus, and the secretary represents our education, our mechanical points of view, local cliches, theories, and opinions that have been automatically formed in us. The secretary has nothing in common with the centers, and indeed, not even with the formatory apparatus. He just works there. Education has nothing to do with the centers. A child is brought up thus. If someone shakes his hands with you, you must always do it like this. It is all purely mechanical. In this case, you must do that. And once established, so it remains. An adult is the same. If someone steps on our corns, we always react in the same way. Adults are like children, and children are like adults. All of us react. The machine works and will go on working in the same way 1,000 years hence. With time, a great quantity of labels accumulate on the office shelves. The longer a person lives, the more labels there are in the office. It is so arranged that all labels of a similar kind are kept in one file, so that when an inquiry comes in, the secretary begins to search for a suitable label. To do this, he must take out the file, look through and sort it out until he finds the right label. A great deal depends on the tidiness of the secretary and in what state he keeps his files. Some secretaries are methodical, others are not. Some keep labels sorted, others do not. One may put in an incoming inquiry in the wrong file, others do not. One finds labels at once, another looks for a long time and mixes them all up while searching. Our so-called thoughts are nothing more than these labels taken out of the file. What we call thoughts are not thinking. We do not think. We have different labels, short, abbreviated, long, but nothing except labels. All this chaos is what we call our thoughts. At the same time, apart from the formatory apparatus, a person does not have thoughts. Every center thinks. These thoughts reach the formatory apparatus in the form of stimuli and then are reconstructed mechanically. And this is so in the best cases, for as a rule, some centers have hardly any means of accurately communicating their thoughts to the formatory apparatus. Owing to faulty connections, messages either are not transmitted at all or are distorted. But this does not prove the absence of thought. All centers continually function. There are thoughts and associations, but these do not reach the formatory apparatus, and therefore are not manifested. Neither are they sent in another direction, that is, from the formatory apparatus to the centers, and, for the same reason, they cannot get there from outside. The centers are themselves the same in everyone. The differences between people lie only in the amount of material the centers contain and in the connections between them. Some have more, others less. A person is born like an empty cupboard or storehouse, but then material begins to accumulate. The machine works alike in everyone, and the properties of the centers are the same, but owing to their nature and the conditions of life, the links or connections between the centers differ in degrees of sensitivity. The coarsest and most accessible is the connection between the moving center and the formatory apparatus. This connection is the most audible, like a large pipe, the quickest to form and to be filled. The second is the connection with the sex center, the third is the connection with the feeling center, and the fourth the connection with the thinking center. The amount of accumulated material and the degree of sensitivity of these connections stand in this gradation. The first connection with the moving center exists and functions in all people, with associations being received and manifested. And the second connection, the one with the sex center, exists in the majority of people. Consequently, most of us live with just these two centers our whole lives. All our perceptions and manifestations originate in these centers and proceed through them. Those whose feeling center is connected with the formatory apparatus are in the minority, with all their perceptions and manifestations proceeding through it. But there is hardly anyone in whom the connection with the thinking center works. Thank you for listening. Please check out my project page on KundaliniQuicksilver.com. Click on the gray bar at the very top and it'll take you right there. Also, please go ahead and subscribe to my TikTok, Kundalini Quicksilver, also my Instagram and YouTube at Quicksilver Astrology. Thank you.